So hello world, good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Monica Kang from Innovators Box. I'm really excited to be back here again. Happy July. We've now entered another month before we realize. And we're continuing on the theme of how we reimagine, rethink. Thanks for those who are joining us live. In the past few weeks, we have been... Good afternoon. This is Monica Kang from Innovators Box. Give me technical errors. I have not done it last time. I'm sorry, guys. So really excited to have you all back here because one of the things that now has been happening since in the past few weeks, of course, is we all had to reimagine the way we work and reimagine the way we deliver our services in the work. And, you know, as many of you, we are wondering with the question, like, how do we do this? Do we just simply go back to being offline, staying online? And in fact, coincidentally, we have two amazing folks who are asking those very questions, specifically in youth education. And so I have a ton of questions. I hope you have some questions too. But with that being said, let me go ahead and start introducing them and see if they're here. Kevin, if you're here, we'd love to hear from you.
Hey, everyone. My name is Kevin Felix Chan. That makes my initials KFC. And I run an education organization called Best Delegate. We provide Model United Nations programs worldwide for high school and middle school primarily, but also elementary school and all the way up to university. And I've been doing this for nearly a decade. We've trained Model UN around the world. I've personally got a chance to teach Model UN in 20 different countries, working with students ranging from indigenous tribes in India all the way to the royal families in the Middle East, and running conferences at the United Nations headquarters. And since COVID, we've been taking all our programs virtually, and we've been running Model United Nations virtually and rethinking about how students learn about the world as they are at home and engaging online.
Yeah, my name is Derrin Slack. I'm the founder of ProAct Indy. It's a service learning organization that is committed to engaging youth in public service that educates, delights, and inspires the youth. And our mission is to stand in the gap for vulnerable populations while empowering youth to actively transform their communities. And so we do that by creating what we call proactive communities that seek to intentionally connect businesses, schools, and nonprofits together. And we facilitate all the engagement between the people within those sectors and organizations. And so since COVID-19, we've always leveraged technology to really manage people and to really engage them in really unique ways. And we're just having to do that more now in this new world. And so I'm really excited to be here. And so I thank you, Monica, and I thank you, Kevin, for having me. Thank you.
Awesome. So with that being said, let's bring us all back. Now you see all three of us, and really excited to have this conversation today, because one of the things I want to just even start with is just the whole topic of youth education. I think it takes a lot of heart and thought to be even in that space. So if I can maybe start with each one of you to learn a little bit more, like, why in the world did you even start thinking of devoting your kind of work and passion into it? Derrin, I would love to learn first maybe from you, why also community service? What inspired you to want to do it in the first place? Why is this important for you?
Yeah, community service and youth engagement is very important. As a kid, I was one of the vulnerable kids that we serve today. As a child, I physically could not talk sometimes because I stutter when I talk at times. And that brought out a lot of low self-esteem issues and a low sense of self-worth. And if it wasn't for caring adults that really saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, I don't think that I'll be sitting here right now in this seat talking to you, Monica. And those adults really saw that I had a good brain and a good head on my shoulders. And they said, we have to get this kid involved in something to bring out his social side. And so they got me involved in sports. And so I was a pretty good athlete and went to college to play football and run track. And in college, I was afforded the opportunity to go on a mission trip to Botswana, Africa. And at first I told my coach, who had this idea to send us football players on this mission trip, I told him no. I said, I am not going overseas to speak in front of people because I cannot talk in front of people. I can't talk, I stutter. And he calls me up a couple weeks later and he says, Derrin, I'm not accepting your no. And I'm going to inform you that your trip is all paid for. So that took away all my excuses. And so I go on this trip, and had I not gone on this trip, I would have never have known that the larger the group I speak in front of, I do not stutter at all. And so that lit a fire in me to seek out every opportunity I could to serve my community. And it wasn't the act of service changing me, it was the people. It, it was the relationships. And so ever since Botswana, I've been all over the world, and to 9 different countries, just serving other people. And so I had the thought, what if I had this experience at a younger age? How would my life be different? And so that sparked the idea for ProAct 10 years ago. And what started with 11 kids served back in 2010, we serve over 10,000 kids a year in our programs and services. And I truly believe that youth are our future. I mean, we need to equip them with the 21st century skills that they need to truly succeed in the modern work environment. And what better place to start with vulnerable youth who just need someone to tell them, hey, you matter, or you have the leadership skills that we can really help you develop and hone in, because all you have to do is find your passion and then the rest goes from there. And I think that service is a very good way to find who you are through service of others. So appreciate the question.
Thank you, Derrin, so much for sharing that, and just your personal story of why out of all the routes. And I'm sure as folks are tuning in, they really would resonate with it, being reminded that we all have somebody else who was there who reminded us when we needed help. Kevin, I know out of all the things you could have also chosen, you chose Model UN as the vehicle. I'll be curious to learn a little bit more why that route, and how is that helping you, and what inspired you to even get into that, to build a whole business out of it?
Yeah, so I absolutely love Derrin's story because I relate to it so much. So as a kid, I was super shy and nervous. And if you told me to do public speaking, I would be nervously shaking like this already. And I would try to hide behind my piece of paper and write out my entire speech because I didn't know what to say. And because I was hiding behind my speech and nervously shaking, I would end up looking like this. So that was me actually when I first started doing Model UN. And fortunately, I got better with practice over time. In this case, it was peers. My own peers encouraged me to, the older students encouraged me to get better. And so I did. I got better through practice and eventually got to serve as the leader of my high school Model UN team, continued doing it in college, served as a leader of my college Model UN team. And then I was volunteering to run all these Model UN conferences. And eventually during my senior year of university, I had an opportunity to introduce the real Secretary General of the United Nations at that time, Ban Ki-moon, in front of 2,400 students at the United Nations General Assembly Hall. So I went from being that kid who was super shy and nervous to speaking at the actual United Nations and introducing the actual Secretary General. And so that's why I really believe in the power of Model UN to change students' lives, make them into confident global leaders, help them find their voice the way that it helped me find my own voice. And I got into it because I realized as I was working in corporate after graduation that I had all this knowledge about Model UN is going down the drain. I should do something about it to share it with the next generation. And at first we just started blogging, and eventually the blog got more popular and people suggested we should do more. So a friend of mine and I, we just decided, who I met through Model UN, we just decided, why don't we just quit our jobs and just teach Model UN full-time as our job and just share everything we know out there. And we did. We quit our jobs and decided to teach Model UN full-time, and that's what I do. And so I think similar to Derrin, my own personal experience was Model UN empowered me, and I want to share that experience with the next generation. And the students these days, they want to become confident, they want to be engaged in communities, they want to create change. And so, I say I'm teaching Model UN, but what I'm really teaching is actually confidence, community, and change. And I think a lot of educators like Derrin and I are basically doing that for our communities.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and really resonating that kind of the why, I think, reflects in how not only the impact that you're both creating, tons of students and educators have gone through and, partnered up with both of you, and the impacts in the lives you're changing. One of the things that I just want to piggyback again is just the reminder of like the people that we surround ourselves with, which, you know, we've talked a lot in every episode for those who have joined us before about the importance of who we surround ourselves with is really important. And then if we have the opportunity to be part of it, how do we learn and be the catalyst for others to be that positive change and inspire? One thing though, I would like to add that I'm super curious is, you know, as somebody who's also been in the space for 10 years and also as an entrepreneur, I think you guys are actually also on the front end seeing the changes of what the next generation is becoming and wanting. I'm curious to hear kind of your thoughts, like what would you say is something that you think people underestimate about the next generation that you think more people should understand and that you're super proud about where they are? And Kevin, maybe if I can start with you on that, and we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, there's this phrase in Model UN that it is student-led learning, that students are teaching each other and they are learning when they work in teams together, when they give feedback to each other's speeches, when they collaborate on resolutions, these documents. And in traditional education, it was very teachers teach the students. But in nowadays, I think students know how to teach each other and they learn through doing and they learn through simulation. And so the role of the teacher has become more of a facilitator and a mentor, and in order to bring out the best in these students and empower them. So I think one of the most underrated things is how do you create environments where students can actually learn by doing and teach each other, as opposed to having to sit in the classroom and just get, just receive lectures. I think my students would probably write on my feedback forms, "This is so boring," like so with many O's, so boring if it was just a lecture. What they really want to do is engage with each other, talk to each other, make friends with each other, connect with each other, learn about each other's worlds. That's what they really want to do. And that's how they get better and become more confident and start understanding how they can create change.
Thank you so much for sharing that, and truly a reminder that how we go interactive, which online, it's a whole other thing. We'll stay tuned for that. But Derrin, what about for you? What are some things that you've noticed that you wish other people understood more?
I think this generation of youth is more apt to be able to connect. I mean, to Kevin's point, we notice that we are in a world that we are inundated by so much information. I mean, from so many different angles and so many different avenues, that our youth are so skilled at tuning in those little different lanes, depending on what they need to focus on at that time, right? And I think that we need to just trust that they are more with it than we might think, that they understand more than we think. And Kevin's exactly right. I mean, what I see in engaging youth is that they just yearn for connection. And I think that's why social media is so important. I mean, I think I think that type of technology is giving this false sense of connection, if you will, which is even more of a cause and more of a reason why they want to connect with people more. And so our approach is so human-centered, and so we value ourselves in being the catalyst for human-centered social good. And our youth, once they understand that if we serve one person, if we look at another person, we are doing so with them in mind, not for me. It's not because I want to feel good. It's not because I want to look good. And sometimes it may come across like that, but I think kids nowadays are more tolerant and more accepting. They are more empathetic, and I think they are a lot more compassionate now when it comes down to it, because once they get that opportunity to truly um, del- um, immerse themselves in a human-centered project or a human-centered opportunity, then they thrive. Like it's like, oh, it's like it, it's so cool to see that light bulb moment, because they just want that opportunity to connect with another with 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 another human being, to hear their story, to understand them, to be able to share their own stories. Because when it comes down to it, I mean, we all just want to be known. And so I think our kids today, I mean, they're more open to being known, more open to knowing others. And I think that's something that's overlooked oftentimes.
Thank you for sharing that. As you're both sharing, one phrase that's coming to mind that I often share with other people is the reminder that, at the end of the day, people want really two things, which is to be understood and understand. And I think one thing that you're both communicating is that, guys, like youth are people too. Like that's where it starts. Like it's
Right.
not until like, it's not when we're older, like from the very beginning. And it's, thank you for both creating spaces for our next generation and how you're empowering both educators and what you do as well. But, of course, COVID-19 kind of flipped the coin for both of you, like everyone else. And as we were preparing just a few minutes before, we got some updated intel in my correction and needing to update this title for the show. So actually, I'm going to start first with Derrin, because you said that, yes, there's things that I can do online, but there's actually things that you're able to do offline. Could you share a little bit more how you are navigating COVID-19 and what are new ways, both online and offline?
Yeah, so ProAct has grown so fast and has cast a large net to engage over 10,000 people a year because of our use of technology. And so we efficiently engage people, communicate with them, teach our youth and teach our adults that work with our youth through our learning management systems, through all this technology, right? But we found that COVID-19, although that we do very well in leveraging that technology, it's not enough to truly go deep enough to keep that human connection. And so this summer, although we had some programs that went virtual, the kids really resonated with it. The kids didn't like that as much. They wanted to really engage with each other and wanted to engage with people. And they wanted to make sure that we could find a way to keep our human-centered approach intact safely, right? And so their parents were on board too. And right now, as I mentioned to Kevin and Monica before this call, we have a summer program going on right now in this building. And the kids are incredibly excited to get out the house and do something. And so we just had a presentation from a partner of ours virtually. And so we're still incorporating that virtual setting and virtual opportunities amongst other people. But we found that our kids, they really challenged us. Hey, can you guys please think of something that we can do in person? And they do like the virtual setting and the virtual approaches to our programming, but they really prefer that human-centered and that human connectedness. And I think it really just comes down to that they are just fatigued by all the technology that they have access to. And we had a discussion this morning actually with our youth, and one child said that they had a love-hate relationship with technology. They love it because we have the world at our fingertips, all the information we need. If we need to figure out something or answer out something, just go, hey Google, or hey Siri, like it's instant, it's instantaneous. But what they're missing is the hate part of it, is that it takes them further and further away from connecting with friends, with having deeper connections with people that they truly care about, with understanding and reading people even, and their emotions and their facial expressions. They miss that, right? And so we had to find a way to think outside the box of how we can engage our youth in person, but also have some type of hybrid approach where we can also incorporate that virtual aspect as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And just, one of the things that I'm hearing from your story is just a reminder of how important it is to listen to what our customers and audience really wants. Ironically, I know, Kevin, that's the very reason why you did take it online, because what your customers were wanting. And you were sharing just a moment ago also how many iterations you had to go through. Tell us a little bit more, like, what encouraged you to find the online method and how is it working for you?
So the fundamental didn't actually change. When I talked to the parents at the beginning of COVID-19, one of the most commonly mentioned pain points was, my kids miss their friends. They just want to hang out with each other. They just want a space for that. And what the actual program was almost secondary. It was like, we just need something for them. And so when we had things that were lecture heavy, or even certain games that were more like Jeopardy, for example, the kids were not reacting to that because that was not fun. That was not connecting. That was not hanging out together. And so we replaced a lot of it with a lot of hangout time. And one of the cool things about the Zoom breakout rooms actually was that we would just do the randomized breakouts. I think some of you who've been on Monica's innovator meetups. You have the random breakout rooms. We started incorporating that into our programs as well, and it enables students to just hang out and meet each other and network, and then randomize them again to meet more people. And that's something that they actually could not have gotten in the past, when in real life they would be hanging out in small little cliques and sticking with a little clique, and then and it's hard for students to meet each other sometimes unless they're really socially confident. So we just created more of that space, and the students have been enjoying that. Like when I look at the feedback forms, some of the students' best activities were just playing games together with each other. And I look at it as learning and growth, because learning is not just about the content that's being learned, it's also learning about themselves and their emotions, and being able to have a space where they feel like I am being able to process this time. I'm able to talk to others who are experiencing similar things as I do. I have a lot of students who are from other countries or other parts of the states, and for them to relate to each other, wow, that's happening in my state too, or my country too, or this is what's not happening in New Zealand when we have students from other countries. It's just very enlightening for them to connect with each other and talk, and they would just stay on the breaks and talk to each other. That's what they want to do. They don't want to take a break. They want to just engage with each other during the breaks as well. So just seeing a lot of those things as non-traditional but very valuable times to get emotional learning and that emotional space, I think is really important for the students.
But if I may follow up a little bit more on that, in addition to that, if I remember correctly, you guys have never done it still online though. I mean, so how do you figure out, because I feel like as someone who does know Model UN, where, you've hinted briefly on, yes, it is easy to stay kind of in our cliques. I've been in that norm. I've been one of the very few non-white people in the Model UN space. So tell us a little bit more, like how, because it feels like something like that, it needs so in person. Like, how are you able to make that online? Can you still share a little bit more?
Yes. So one of the things we have is a 10-to-1 ratio. So every 10 students has one mentor, and the mentor creates a lot of that breakout space where it's mentor-led as well. So there's a combination of student-led and there's a combination of mentor-led. And I think that creates a safe space for the students to engage and learn and have that guidance. And a lot of it is also about offline mentorship. So there's a lot of one-on-one that happens where we ask the students on the first day, what is your goal? How do we bring out the best in you? Where did you start? And what's the one level for you that you want to get higher, right? So now we're not trying to take everyone to the same level. It's just, what's that one level for you? And knowing that in mind, we build that into the feedback that the students get, the personalized feedback that the students get throughout the week, so that they feel like they are getting that individualized attention and growth. And I think that's important to facilitate as well. And I think as we move into online, it becomes even easier to facilitate that personalized feedback that may be more difficult in the 30-person in-person classroom.
So many layers, so many layers in the design. Thank you, Kevin, for elaborating that, because it, absolutely ties back to including what Derrin was sharing. At the end of the day, it's really that human connection. And thank you for the shout out on the Innovators Meetup. That is exactly one of the many reasons why we've been doing this. And for those guests who are noticing us online, they actually are repeat guests, because they have both also been in Innovation Unscripted, one in Asian American and parents. And so kind of alluding to that, one other question I'm curious to hear from both of you is, you yourself are innovators. So it's one thing to, yes, ideate, problem solve, help the next generation, do the work that you do. But let's be honest, there's a whole bucket of like additional challenges as an innovator. I'm sure we have like a moment of like, oh, shiny ideas. Like, what do I do with this? Like, wait, we have this customer saying this, like, what do I do with this? And so tell us a little bit more, like, especially now where I feel like it's really important for us to stay grounded and have clarity. It sounds like you two have found a way to do so. Like, what's actually helping you stay grounded to serve not only the communities and the stakeholder you have, but also continue to ideate and think forward, because it's not easy, honestly. And so whoever's able to start first, would love to hear.
Yeah, I can start. I think I think it's Winston Churchill that said, "Crisis brings opportunity." And so, to your point, Monica, us innovators have to kind of quell our excitement in times like this, because we have so many ideas, and I think it's important is that I surround myself with people that are not like me, who and it took a long time to get here, but I had to be intentional, more intentional now, to get people that are truly confident enough to say no to my passion, to my excitement, and it and it's all a negotiation from there, right? I have team members that it's an open, vulnerable forum to where, hey, if Derrin is going a mile a minute, tell him to stop and take a breath, and let's talk through this together about what we can do, what might be feasible. And so that's why we had to pivot. It took us a little bit to pivot to accept kids in person, right? Because I had, yeah, so me, yeah, I'm just like, okay, let's just do whatever the kids want to do. But I have a team around me that's cognizant of, hey, let's make sure that we are are taking the necessary steps to be safe, um, to make sure that all of our stakeholders are taken care of, and that we are abiding by the law of the land right now, if you will. All right. And so it took a while, say a while, like 3 or 4 weeks. But here now, and I think being an innovator, it's important that we have the right counsel around us, and that we, once we make that decision to do something, we actually do it and follow through with it. Because I don't know about you all, Kevin and Monica, but sometimes I'll get excited about one thing and then move on to the next thing, and it's like the next thing, okay, but I got to make sure I follow through with it. And then once it's going and that flywheel is being pushed, I have to make sure that somebody else is in that place behind me to keep carrying it forward. And so it's important to develop that right team around you that's going to push you, that's going to say no, that's going to hold you accountable, and it's going to help get you to the right place to take the right steps to make something happen and to and to get the right outcome. So
Again, people matter. I mean, we're going to continue on this theme, whether it's thinking about the youth, thinking about the people we surround ourselves with. But Derrin, thank you for being honest about how we tackle shiny objects around us. Kevin, I know you have ways that you navigate as well. Share us what your secret sauce is. How are you able to stay grounded?
Yeah, the number one thing I do is breathwork meditation. And I mean, there are many ways for people to stay grounded, but I think have something. And for me, what that causes as an effect in me is realizing I have a lot of expectations of myself and of my programs. And a lot of this is built up in my head. And the top thing I need to do, or I get to do through breathwork meditation, is just release all those expectations. And once that's released, then it becomes this creative, ideative game where everything is awesome, and no matter what happens. I think that helps a lot. Second thing that helps a lot is keep things simple. So I have my weekly team meeting on my board, simplify. And as we discuss about different things that we're doing, different deliverables, we ask each other, is this simple? Are we launching too many things at once? Does this feel simple? If the answer is it's not simple, let's simplify, or let's not do it. And then the third thing I think is also just listening to the parents and the students, or the customers, and realizing I'm not the hero here. They are the hero of this journey, and I'm here to support them and figure out what they want and what they like, and that might change over time. So when there's feedback, including low enrollment in certain programs or low ratings of certain programs, that's great. They're telling me what the hero is telling me what's not working. Let me help the hero into something that is working better. And I think that keeps me grounded too, because I see the feedback as something that is positive for, I love that Derrin mentioned the flywheel, that a lot of people are function in the whole traditional like marketing funnel, but flywheel is like, it's a journey. It's a continuous journey. And I'm merely here to support, make the flywheel move, make the journey keep going, because I can create valuable experiences, all sorts of valuable experiences. And that keeps me grounded to know that this is a never-ending process, and it's not just something that needs to get launched and lots of sales immediately. That's just that's a temporary phase.
And I think, Kevin, to echo that, what I'm hearing is going back to the cycle of what we're all saying about is that, starting with our beginning conversation, just even, when we started this conversation at the beginning, is what you both shared was what inspired you to even start this business. And what I'm hearing is in itself of how you got here in itself is a journey, and you're just creating more journey experiences for others. And I think that probably reflects in both the success, but also where you are as a leader, and also how you're inspiring others, because your root cause is not just to make more money or like to help serve as X many people, but it's really because going back to that why. So thank you again for sharing that and reminding innovators out there that if you are looking at the shiny objects, go back to your why and remember why you're doing what you do, whether it's simplifying or going back to understanding where you need to take your feedback to hear what it is. Well, but that being said, I'm sure still there's things that, kind of scratching our head a little bit, like, man, like, how do we still make sure we show up as who we are as a person, but also like become a better leader? Because I think part of it, what I also noticed is with COVID-19, as we're spending more time online, there's really kind of no separation between the personal and professional space. And as you're being more available for your stakeholders, for your team, and Derrin, in your case, for your family as well. Tell me a little bit more, like, how do you make sure you stay still like leading your team with the innovative ideas? I think it's still additional layer to how you stay grounded, because it's not just being distracted by looking at the shiny objects, but how do you make sure that you're listening to all the stakeholders, but also continue to open up the space? And I think balancing that professional and personal space is an additional aspect to it. So Derrin, would love to hear your thoughts, because I know one thing that you hinted last time in the parent show was even just what it means for you as a father navigating that and being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think I talk about this all the time, but it's vulnerability. I think vulnerability, as Brene Brown says, is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and something else.
Courage, maybe courage. I have her book here.
Maybe
Something like
something. You can look it up and see.
Love you.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we can figure out the exact quote later, but I think vulnerability allows me, my team, my family, and me looking through the lens of being a father. Every time that I'm vulnerable, it opens other people up, right? It makes other people be more creative because they are then more comfortable around me, right? And I'm a charismatic guy. I'm a founder, and running this successful organization. But it wasn't until I started to admit and be comfortable admitting that I didn't know everything, that I am not good at everything, even, right? As hard as it was to admit, I had to do it. But once I did it, that's when doors started to open. That's when hearts started to open. And with my wife and with my kids, whenever I admit I am wrong, it softens them up and brings them closer to me, right? And so when you ask the question of how we're navigating, and that I'm able to really take in all that I'm taking in from stakeholders and people that I trust in and confide in, and still remain innovative and pushing the envelope. I think when I come back to them and present a vulnerable front, right, it gives way to more creativity, more innovation, just from the other teammates and from other people around me. And even with our youth, I found that just being ourselves, I mean, our youth don't care how much we know. They just want to know how much we care. And if we are vulnerable in that sense and open enough to really share our own stories unabashedly and be unabashedly ourselves, then they then that light bulb moment just happens quicker because they are more comfortable around this intimidating adult, right? And they are more comfortable in saying, "Oh, well, you're just like me. Oh, you came from the same place I did. You came in a single family household too." Right? It it just bars more excitement and more energy from them, which breeds more innovation, more creativity, and more openness. And I think that's what drives us forward so quickly, and causes us to really think outside the box a bit, because our culture doesn't truly value vulnerability and openness and transparency, right? And it doesn't pride itself in failure. Yes, yes, Brene Brown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't really value failure that way. And so I tell my staff, I tell our youth, I tell our board, I say, hey, if you don't value failure, if you aren't willing to try, because if you're not trying, you aren't failing. If you're not failing, you're not trying. All right. And if you're not willing to try and be comfortable with failing and learning from those mistakes, then this is not a good place for you. Right. Because we have to keep trying new things and keep failing at new things, right? To learn what's going to work and what's going to stick. Because our youth count on it, our communities count on it, and other innovators count on it too to learn from us. It's a
Thank
long
you
answer.
for sharing that. I mean, it's such a powerful reminder. And, thank God Bernie Brown started that whole kind of movement and what her work is a few years back, because, we've had at least some conversations in the universe, right, about vulnerability. But you're absolutely right. We still got significant work to do, which ties perfectly. I mean, Kevin, for you, how you're navigating the professional personal space, I'll be curious to add that layer into, I know you've uniquely kind of been the way you've been carrying your team is extra special. And I'll be curious to hear if you can share some lights into how you've been doing that, because it's not easy. I know a lot of teams currently with COVID-19, we've had to let our teams go. I admit, even in my situations, I've had to make transitions. And yet for the team to be cared and to care for the youth, we'll be curious how you're doing it and what stories.
So I feel like Derrin and I are maybe twins because our answers are very similar, or like the cultures we built are very similar. The word that kept thinking in my head is trust and authenticity, and caring and being caring about each other. In my weekly meeting with my staff, the very first thing we read off is personal headlines. What was our personal headline from the past week? And in my one-on-ones so I have one-on-ones with every single members of my staff on a weekly basis. And then the very first item on our agenda is personal check-in. How are you feeling at the moment? And I want to make sure that we are cared for as people first. And it is us as people that is going to make everything happen. So we need to make sure that people are doing well. And then to share when we're practicing self-care, and to share the things that we're learning as well. We have Slack channels for social. We have Slack channels for learning. I just held a staff dinner the other day where we had 20-something of our staffers show up, and I reimbursed them all for their meals just to get a chance to just chat. And it was just awesome. Everyone was just hanging out on a Friday evening, just eating dinner together virtually and sharing what type of food they were ordering. And so I think a lot of that's just human. Like I think Derrin mentioned this term multiple times too, humanizing the experience. We're doing something, but we're working, but at the same time, we're all humans and we're all part of the same family, not just team, but we're part of the same family. And we need to care about each other and have each other's back. But what helps me personally to stay grounded in order to empower that is that I do a lot of self-care myself. I have a whole list of things that I can just draw from for self-care. I also journal every day. I have my external release groups. So I'm in multiple entrepreneur organizations. One is called EO, Entrepreneur Organization, and then the one's called ACE NextGen. And so with these two groups, I have spaces to outlet and to learn, and for me to walk in and be also a student. And that's the mentality I sometimes remind myself, is that I'm a teacher, but I'm also a student at the same time. And to approach it with humility and to say, hey, I'm here to learn from others. And I take that experience with my own staff as well. Sometimes I'm their student. I have my staffer lead a meeting and I am the student. I'm learning from them. And it's like, great, I love all your recommendations. Let's do all of them. You know better than I do. And so I think it's a combination of all these things to show that we care both professionally and personally.
Thank you both for being a caring leader and walking the talk. Okay, since you're talking about caring, I'm gonna play devil's kind of, I guess, devil advocate and ask you the question of like, okay, fine, Kevin, Derrin, that's cool. Like, I get it. I want to care, but like, honestly, like, I don't have time. I'm busy. Like, how in the world am I supposed to like care? Like, I see your examples. Like, how would you share advice to somebody like that, whether as a leader or an educator, if they're like, I don't know how I can care better about my community. Yes, I can be vulnerable and share my wrongdoing, but like, it's not working, Derrin. I don't know what to do else. Like, what do you have to say? If I can hear maybe a specific advice from each one of you, would be curious to hear. Derrin, if you can start.
I'll keep it short. Seek first to understand before being understood. I think it's important for us as people to really seek to understand people and who they are, where they come from, what what are they affected by in their daily lives, like how how do they live. And so I think caring is just being curious, right? And once you seek to understand, then you can start to better bridge that gap to being understood. um, and I always tell people that when we talk about human-centered approaches and holding people first and showing people that you care, well, oftentimes we don't connect with people often because of conflict arising from whatever it may be, right? Something. I'm not going to get into that rabbit hole, but we don't connect with people because we're really fearful, right? And when we do have conflict, I think it's important, and this is weird to say, but I have a mantra that says, as far as I'm concerned, the problem is me. For whatever reason, if we are not moving forward in some type of conflict or in some type of relationship, someone has to step back and say, well, maybe the problem is me. Like, what am I doing that's causing us not to move forward? Right. And I always use the example, have you ever been in an argument with somebody that thought that they were wrong? No, we have not. Right. And so someone has to say, well, maybe I am wrong. And what does that cause us to do? It causes us to step into the other person's side to see and to understand more about what they may be seeing that's causing this disconnect, that's causing us from going forward. And I think, and if we have that mantra and hold tight to understanding maybe the problem is me, then we can start to ask more questions to understand first before being understood. And so that's my advice.
Hmm. A lot of solution makers out there. You're gonna have to rethink about where you are. Kevin, what's your advice?
Oh, along the same lines. So I think there's this term I practice called extreme ownership, and it's taking ownership of myself first before I can care for others. And so the question I would think if I was in this type of situation is, am I even practicing caring for myself? Do I understand what makes me tick? Why I'm nervous about something? Why am I stressed? Do I understand what am I fearful of? And am I getting enough rest? Am I near burnout? Do I know what burnout even looks like? I think a lot of that is self-reflection too, and the expectation before that understanding how to care for others is to be able to care for yourself. And so, my question is, am I making enough time for myself? And can I feel better than I currently am? Or a better way is, what do I want to feel? What do I want to feel? What do I want to create? What does my life want to do? And then now I contrast it to where I'm currently at and say, okay, why is there this difference? So what's causing that? Do I know? And so I think it's a lot of those self-reflecting questions first, which can easily be done through some journal time or just some weekend reflection session, or even just through, I love walking along the cliffs of Laguna Beach out in California, just like staring into the ocean. So a lot of that self-care, I think, is really important before we can even ask the question of how do we care for others?
Self-awareness, self-care, self-understanding, and really caring. Man, I think it's going to be a little trick almost when folks look at the headline and they're like, oh, I'm going to get like tactical tips. I'm like, but guys, surprise, like to get the tactical tips, you need to do the self-work. That's what we're talking about here. And really appreciate you just being both honest, because I would say often some of these conversations, I think even though we talk about it, we don't hear enough on stage. And so for both of you just being vulnerable and honest about where your story and what you've taken the work to do to be as a leader, I hugely appreciate it. Um, I'm curious though, going back to, the youth though, for youth out there who's watching this, I'm like, oh, wow, I'm hearing from my fans like Kevin and Derrin, like, that's so cool. But like for them, as they're watching this, I'm like, what would be a piece of advice that you would want to share with them and how they can be more courageous and find their path in that uncertainty ahead? And Kevin, maybe I can start with you.
I think the top thing is don't be afraid to ask questions. I notice a lot of top performers who have found their passion or have just done really well in what they do is that one big difference they do is they just ask more questions. They don't think there are any dumb questions, and they ask more questions. They ask questions to more people. They're fearless in asking those questions, and that also goes back to the self-care part. Start asking those questions for yourself too. I think it's really common for youth to grow up in societies where their teachers tell them a certain thing, or their parents tell them a certain thing, or their friends tell them a certain thing, or the media tells them a certain thing, and they think that's what I want to do. And it's very difficult to break out of that and to just ask, is this what I really want to do? And what am I curious about? Is being curious about your oneself, and to ask those questions. And then what am I curious about in terms of what other people are doing? Maybe I don't know anything about it, but can I ask? And that's why I really love the power of Model UN, because it puts them into a perspective of a country that they're not familiar with, or maybe they even disagree with, and they have to understand from that perspective. And I think when they're curious about other points of view that are out there, that's what enables a lot of that creativity, and that's what enables youth to really expand their worldview. So fundamentally, it can be applied to lots of different things, but at the end of the day, it's asking those questions and creating that curiosity from within.
Thank you so much. Planting the seed of curiosity, onward and continuing. Derrin, what about for you?
I think it's important for youth to understand that they just need to do what they think is right. Right. I think Kevin hit the nail on the head when he said to ask questions, to be curious about themselves, to understand who they are first before they go venture out into the world. And I can speak from personal experience. I wish I knew who I was earlier. I wish I took the time to understand who I was. And I wish I was more confident as a younger person, to be comfortable in being myself. I was very inward focused, but I think once I started to be more outward focused, to be more open, to share my story with other people, to connect with other people, that allowed me to understand who I was more, right? And and the second I started to listen to others about myself, which is really, really hard to do, that's when things started to change. And I started to really have more confidence in myself. And I think for young people today, I think it's even more important to take the time to truly understand who you are, to find your passion, to dig deep and look at the world around you, look at the people around you, and evaluate, oh, are these people the right people in my life? Is what I'm doing the right thing? Are the things I'm focusing my mind on and my time on, are those the right things? And so I think youth today just need to do what is right, and dig deep and understand and be comfortable with who they are, and do that early on. And then once you do that, then the rest is easy from there. I think once we know who we are and are comfortable with that, then we can overcome stuttering, can overcome shyness, we can overcome just about anything if we're confident in who we are and comfortable with it. So.
And I love that both of you are emphasizing again, it's not needing to do a 4 or 5 step model of like, this is what the path of success looks like. The keyword choices that you keep emphasizing at the end of the day is really around that human aspect. And, I wish we had this conversation earlier so I could have thought about all of this earlier too. And it brings us the reminder of, what are in fact things that maybe educators could start keeping more in mind now. I know, both of you are entrepreneurs and educators. You also teach your programs. You also train your staff to teach the programs. But, this is your chance to give that message and recommendation for other educators. Like, please, I plead you, we recommend that you consider, these 4 values or this particular approach if you really want to show care to the youth. And Kevin, if I can maybe start with you on that.
Well, we talked a lot about human-centered design, and I think Derrin mentioned this a lot too. curriculum traditionally is not approached that way in school. It's about hitting certain content that we know, and even 21st century skills, which Derrin mentioned earlier. Sometimes the skill is also still about checking off the box that like they know how to do this. Maybe they can speak to this. But I think if we really want to build that into the way students learn, then it's putting that first. For example, I am not teaching about international relations. I am here teaching about empathy, and international relations just happens to be the vehicle of how I'm going to do it. So how do I redesign my lesson in a way where, for example, they have to role play or do a simulation or do an activity project or actually just talk to people who are affected by these issues? I think that's step one. You know, there's in Model UN, a lot of students are debating about issues that they've never experienced personally, and or don't know anybody who has experienced personally. If they're debating about poverty or effects of climate change and even like racism and human rights, if they aren't affected by that personally because they've just not lived in that sort of environment. So talking to those people first is learning already, and developing that empathy and putting those human emotions and human growth into and mindset growth into that curriculum, and reorienting all the curriculum and activities and content around that. I think that would be very helpful. And I think for better or worse, like for worse, our current schools don't teach us to be people, right? They teach us to just know stuff. And in the 21st century, we need to be people. We need to know how to interact as people as we step into the real world.
Absolutely. No, I mean, thank you very much for kind of reminding us again how educators can take more mindful approaches. Derrin, what about for you? What's something that you wish educators did more so that way they create the spaces that you're describing?
Yeah, Kevin said it earlier. I mean, we are very like-minded. Because I would say the same thing.
Why orchestration goes. There's a reason why how I do this planning, guys.
I know you did a great job, Monica. I think the only thing I would add on to that, I mean, really, Kevin said it. I mean, we need to start seeing people as people. And I think educators and people in general just need to see people as people. And I read a lot about I read a lot from the Arbiter Institute, and they really talk about having an outward mindset. And they talk about this difference between an inward mindset and an outward mindset. An inward mindset is characterized by a focus on our own needs and objectives, while an outward mindset, it says that we are aware of the needs of those around us and have the willingness to adjust to what we are doing in order to be more helpful, right? And so when you're thinking inward, you're saying others don't matter like I matter. But when you think more outward and you have this outward mindset, others matter like I matter. And so I'm going to do whatever I can to treat this person like the person they are, to treat this child, to treat this student like the person they are, right? And that means that we may have to do some things that are unconventional. I mean, to Kevin's point, I mean, we're so regimented in our curriculum and how we teach and how we educate. It's all about checking a box and meeting this standard or that standard, but there is no one size fit all for our students. My son has ADHD. He doesn't learn like other students. I have ADD and I don't learn like other students or other people, right? Hence my squirrel approach and no, I'm just joking. But but I think it's important that we really truly see people as people and understand what their needs, desires, and hopes are. Because I think that once educators, once we people understand that on a deep level and change our mindset behind that with how we approach every person that we encounter, then we can make real change to drive communities forward, to drive families forward, to drive schools forward. And I think it's really important. I mean, educators have a great opportunity to do that, to really invest in relationships with their young students.
If I could just add quickly on what Derrin mentioned, some key words here is the hopes and dreams of the students. That's where we can unlock the power. And I challenge the educators, do we know the hopes and dreams of our own students? Because when we do, you're the one that's going to really change their lives, and they're going to remember you forever. And I think one of my teachers mentioned this in high school. He's pretty sure that no one's going to remember like what he actually taught in class, but if he was a good teacher, people will remember him. And I think that's the key here, is what is the hopes and dreams of our students, and are we doing things to enable that dream and hope to happen?
Thank you both for adding that. And, Kevin, to add to that last comment, that's one of the reasons why one of my favorite quote is by Maya, Angelou, where she talks about it's not what you speak or say, it's the experience that people remember. And I think, going back to that, that's us remembering as humans. And I think, lucky everyone, you're going to be able to rewatch this because this is on YouTube, so you can rewatch it anytime. But just being reminded that I think humanizing it doesn't have to be that until you're a CEO like the both of it. It could be something maybe in the way that you're talking with your friends, maybe in the way you send an email out, maybe in the way that you respond to somebody on social media. Instead of us reacting, how do we respond more? And so there's so many golden nuggets. Just to recap a few: how do we humanize our experience more? How do we remember who we're serving? How do we remember our why? How do we make sure we are honoring our hopes and dreams for those who are serving? And why are we doing this and thinking outward instead of inward? But most importantly, how to make sure we are staying grounded, because it's one thing for us to serve. And as we said, as innovators, we are tempted and wanting to serve more. But if we are not staying grounded and being true to ourselves, whether it's self-care or growing as a better innovator and a human being, we're not ready to actually serve the community that we want to serve. And so I hope many of you are equally inspired. Again, you can rewatch this as continue on, and we have many more conversations this month as we continue to think about the theme, how do we reimagine, really on the theme of humanizing the experience online. But with that being said, we'd love to hear kind of, core advice as we wrap up. Kevin, starting with you. If everyone forgets everything that they watched and they just went to the end, because I know they always do this, it's like, what's one single piece of advice that you would share with innovators and what they can do more and to be a better innovator?
Rewatch this whole video. No, I'm kidding. The phrase we have at our company is the best delegate brings out the best in other delegates. And everyone we try to train to become a best delegate, and then so that they can bring out the best in others. But before you can bring out the best in others, you have to know how to bring out the best in yourself. And so I think it's really important to really do that inward work, and then that way you can serve outward and in a very humanizing way.
Derrin.
I would say don't be afraid to be unabashedly yourself. I think when you inspire others, you're doing so from a place of vulnerability and transparency and a place of authenticity that breeds comfort and innovation in other people. So I think on that note, it's uncomfortable sometimes to be ourselves. So I would say my closing thought would be comfortable with the uncomfortable.
Thank you both for sharing that. And because you do have programs that you're running, I mean, even if people see this later, they can go to your website. But I want to give a shout out if you were able to share, because I know there's still programs that students can join and educators can learn more. Could you share a little bit more about it? Kevin, if you can start first.
Sure. We do have virtual Model United Nations programs going on throughout the summer. They're all at learnmodelun.com. And we have both camps going as well as debates going. And there will be a lot more programs in the fall, because I think there's a lot of parents and students are letting us know there's high demand for virtual education. And so, and then the regular website for those who already do Model UN is bestdelegate.com. And that's our normal website where we have lots of Model UN resources, tips, guides, articles, and so forth. Thank you for checking it out. And thank you, Monica, for hosting, and Derrin for being part of this.
Yes,
thanks.
Absolutely. Derrin, please.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I mean, you're awesome. So I can't wait to learn more about what you're doing and visiting your website. But for us, we're hosting some virtual trainings around diversity, education, and social equity and different social issues, because we truly believe that we truly can't serve people effectively. We don't understand the social context that they live in. So visit our website at proactindy.org. And look at the link that says ProAct University, and you can sign up for our online virtual learning management system to tap into when we are training. And we train via Zoom. We're even training in person, and we even have some online courses that you can tap into as well.
So good. So many awesome nuggets. Thank you also, Emily and Rosado, for joining us live and sharing with us your enthusiasm and how you're feeling, and many others. Thank you both again for how you walk your talk. I think it speaks huge volume, not only to do what you do, but have been doing it for a decade and see the patterns. And so really excited. Thank you all for joining us live and rewatching this again. This is your host, Monica King, and I will be back again next Monday, whereas we talk about, geez, okay, now that everything is online, I'm going to ask a friend who usually does perfume making in person and how she does this online. So that's going to be a special episode because she's in Korea, so I'm going to be waking up a little bit earlier, so look out for the time. But with that being said, thank you, Kevin and Derrin, and we will see you later again.